Good afternoon. How are you? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Thank you. Um, so this session is an extension of the past uh, three consecutive sessions on um, data analysis. And I think it would be great if you can go back and refer to those session videos on the EMA website so that you can have a full picture of what we're talking today, and so that you can be able to conduct some of these tests on your own. So in today's session, we're going to see about regression analysis. And okay, someone from EMA side, Teddy's couldn't show up today. So if there's any question that I have missed, please make sure to forward it to me. Thank you. So in today's session, we're going to talk about regression analysis. So I think you all have been seeing this definition for the past, I don't know, 3-4 months, almost on every webinar. So research is a process of answering a research question or a problem. So through this process, one of the most critical phase that we do is analyze our data so that we can give answer, like a concrete answer to our research question. This is the phase where we answer our research question so that that result can be applied to practice. So data analysis is simply a systematic process of applying our statistical knowledge and scientific knowledge to our managed data so that we can answer our research questions. So don't forget that analysis is not just a statistical technique, it's rather something that needs our scientific knowledge and critical judgment into using the proper test and applying it in the proper scenario. So simply data analysis means making a meaning out of raw data. So to answer our question, from a raw data to an informed decision-making process, we have to go through the process of data analysis. So how do we make a meaning? We have different levels of data analysis, or we can call them steps. The first one is describing our data. So in any research, we start by characterizing our study population. So how many people we have studied, how many of them are males, females, their age, their educational status, their income, I don't know, their clinical characteristics, their behavioral factors, and so many other things that are included in our study should be described at the beginning of any research. So it should be something that should be presented in the first part of results section in any research by describing our data. So this is something that can be answered using descriptive analysis. The second one is comparing groups. That means in some research where we have comparative groups, that means comparative research designs like comparative cross-sectional study, case control, cohort, or experimental study. One of the criteria is to compare the groups that we have built the cohort or the comparator group. So by comparing the groups, we will reach to a conclusion that running the analysis with this population group, whether it's fair or not. So comparing groups is one of the very important step in analyzing a comparative research design study. So for this, we use inferential analysis, particularly comparison analysis. We have covered these two in the previous webinars. So today we're going to see building relationship, which is the part where we look for a relationship between our exposure and outcome. That means we try to see if our exposure is responsible for causing our outcome. So this is an analysis that we do only in analytic research designs. In the descriptive research designs, like case report, case series, ecological designs, or descriptive cross-sectional study, we don't do analytic research. Rather, they're simply descriptive research, and they don't have a relationship analysis. And to reach to our conclusion, to build our relationship, we have to use inferential analysis methods, particularly regression analysis. So let's see assessing relationship or regression analysis. So this is something that we do to identify the significant exposures or factors that could possibly affect our outcome. So it's something that we do in analytic research. So let's see some article review first. This is an article that I have showed you in the previous webinar. So this is, I think you can see the page, right? You can see the article. Okay, can you see the article? Okay, I think you can see it now. So this is a study on factors associated with development of symptomatic disease in Ethiopian COVID-19 patients, a case control study. So this is one of a comparative research design, which should employ all of the 3 levels of analysis. That means descriptive analysis, which is mandatory for any type of research, and then comparative analysis, because this is a study design which is comparative in nature, and we have to be able to compare our cases and controls before running regression analysis to identify the presence of significant relationships. So last time we have seen that after describing our data based on their socio-demographic, comorbid illness, and disease-related variables, we have seen that this research has compared the symptomatic and asymptomatic groups, that's the cases and controls, so that in order to identify the presence of significant difference or similarity between the groups. So in today's session, we're going to see the final analysis, which is factors associated with the presence of symptom or development of symptom in COVID-19 patients. So this is the analysis table. Let me show you. So in this table, we have assessed the relationship between our exposure and outcome variables, so that we can see which variables are significant, which variables are not significant. And for the significant variables, we try to quantify their effect in terms of their measure of association, which is either odds ratio or relative risk. But in this case, since it's a case control study design, we have used adjusted odds ratio value. So the significant p-values are those p-values which are less than 0.05, which are also marked as bold and with asterisks. And for the significant variables, we have to check their adjusted odds ratio to see the magnitude and direction of relationship between the exposure and the outcome. So to get something like this, to get the crude odds ratio, adjusted odds ratio, and p-value, and to interpret our result, we have to go through some steps. So let's see those steps, and we'll get back to this article again. So this is something very critical that you should remember all the time. So I try to bring it in every session, so that if there are new attendants, I don't want you to be confused because you don't know these things. So any analysis tool selection criteria is based on the level of based on the type of variable that we have. So be it descriptive, comparative, or regression analysis, we have to pick some analytic tool to run the tests. So that's the choice of the statistical tool to use depends on the scale of measurement of the variables to be analyzed. So just to refresh your memory, we have 2 types of variables, categorical and numeric. In categorical, there are 2 scale of measurement. The first one is nominal. It's when our variables do not have any natural order, but they're just random responses or labels of responses with no order or rank. But when these variables have a natural order or rank, we call it an ordinal variable. And for the numeric variables, that's something that we quantify. We give numbers to, like age, for example. We call them numeric variables, and numeric variables are recorded either as discrete values, which are values which assume only integer values, or it could be continuous scale. That means our variables assume decimal values in addition to the integer values. So differentiating between these is very important, because everything that we do in analysis depends on the knowledge of the scale of measurement of your study variable. So it could be either nominal, ordinal, discrete, or count data, or continuous data. So understanding this is very important. So let's see the steps to running a regression analysis. The first one is we have to be able to select the appropriate regression model. So regression model is something that we run so that we can see the relationship between our exposure and outcome variables. So to see that relationship, there are steps that we should follow. So the first one is we have to select the appropriate regression model. Without selecting the proper tool for our research question, for our research variables, we can't reach to a valid conclusion. So what are the steps? While selecting the regression model, we have to see three things. The first one is study design. The other is we have to see if we're interested in measuring the outcome or time to outcome. And the other is the outcomes scale of measurement. So if you remember in comparative analysis, we have said that understanding identifying the scale of measurement for both the exposure and the outcome is important. But in regression analysis, the only scale of measurement that matters in selecting our regression model is just the outcome. So this is a very important thing to understand, because people usually get confused by considering their exposure variables scale of measurement too. They say they might not have picked the right regression model, but to pick the right regression model, the only scale of measurement that you have to refer to is just the outcome. Forget the exposure scale of measurement. It's not relevant in regression analysis. So let's see, based on the study design, whether we're interested in the outcome or the time to the outcome and the scale of measurement of the outcome. Let's see the proper types of regression analysis. So the first thing is, oops, I'm sorry, something happened to the table. We have categorized our study design into two. If we're doing a cross-sectional or case control study, based on the level of evidence that we get from these two research designs, the output that we get at the end, which is from the regression model here, is somehow comparable, the level of evidence. So we usually use the same regression analysis models for cross-sectional and case control design. And the difference in the selection of the regression model depends on the other factors here. So cohort and experimental, again, because of their similarity in the level of evidence, somehow they're close. Since the population they build is from exposure to outcome, and since they assess risk, we use similar regression models for the two study designs, and the choice of regression model within these study designs vary based on, again, these two factors. So let's see them one by one. So let's say we're using a cross-sectional or case control study design, and what we're interested in is studying the outcome. Most of the time, our interest is studying the outcome. That means we have exposure here, and we have outcome here. Most studies are interested in measuring the outcome itself. That means, let's say smoking is our exposure, and we're studying if the patient develops lung CA. So at the end of the day, the ultimate thing that we want to measure is if the patient has lung CA or not. But sometimes, instead of just the outcome itself, we might have a different interest, which we're going to see later. So for now, we are interested in measuring the outcome in most studies. So that's what we're going to see. So the first possibility is that for a cross-sectional or case control study, in which we're studying the outcome itself or measuring the outcome itself, the outcome variable could be something that's measured on a continuous scale. Let's say we're assessing the factors that could affect the serum calcium level among ICU patients, for example. So our outcome is serum calcium level. It's a continuous variable. So if we have that kind of variable for a cross-sectional or case control design, we have to use a linear regression model. And from the linear regression model, the measure of association that we get to quantify the relationship between the exposures and the outcome is called a regression coefficient. So this is what we get out of a linear regression. And if the outcome variable is on a discrete scale, that means account data. For example, let's say we're interested in studying hospital lengths of stay among ICU patients, then this is account data. We're counting the hospital stay in terms of number of days, whole number of days. So the first option is to use Poisson regression model, but if Poisson regression model fails its assumptions, which is actually the case in almost 100% of the time, especially in medical research fields. The fulfilling the assumption of Poisson regression is very difficult with medical research data. So it usually fails, and when it fails, we use the negative binomial regression model. So for now, just understand that these two models are models that we use when our outcome is a discrete data, and we can get either regression coefficient or we can use the exponentiate value, which is odds ratio. The fourth option is when in this design, while we're measuring the outcome variable in a cross-sectional or case control design, we can have a categorical variable, and that categorical variable could be just two responses. When we have only two responses, for example, for disease outcome, when we have only death or being alive, discharged alive, then we use a binary logistic regression model. And the measure of association that we get out of this regression model is odds ratio. Well, I'm going to put a star on this because this is almost like 100% of the time the type of research that we do for our masters or other residency or specialty program fulfillment. We usually tend to pick binary outcomes, and we conduct cross-sectional study. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with this one. But I want you to know that there are multiple options which we can choose rationally based on our research question and the study design that we use. So the other is when this categorical variable is 3 or more responses, and when these responses do not have any natural order, that means when the categorical variable is just nominal, then the proper type of model to use is multinomial regression model. So multinomial regression model, when you run that model, what you get is odds ratio. In general, both binary and multinomial are within the family of logistic regression. So every time you run a logistic regression, what you get is odds ratio. So don't forget that, whether binary or multinomial. When this categorical response has 3 or more responses, just like the above one, but when they have natural order, that means when it's an ordinal variable, like this is stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and for a malignancy, for example, these are ordered responses. A patient goes through every stage to reach to the stage 4. But in this case, in disease outcome, somebody could die, complicate, or could get discharged their life. They don't have any natural order. Rather, it's something a patient could die, could get discharged without developing complication, or could die, I don't know, and skip the other phases. So these are not ordered, but this one is ordered. So when it's an ordered response, we use ordinal logistic regression analysis. And again, the measure of association we get is odds ratio. These are important to know because sometimes when you review articles, people put relative risk as a measure of association they have used when they actually run a logistic regression model. So when somebody asks you to review an article, these are the things that you can also see and check if they have used the proper regression model and if they have run it properly. So this is all about cross-sectional and case control study designs and their choice of a regression model. When you have cohort or experimental design and when you are measuring the outcome, there are 3 scenarios. The first one is just like the case control or cross-sectional study design. You can have a continuous numeric variable like serum calcium level. You use the same regression model and you get the same results. For numeric variable on a discrete scale like hospital length of stay, just like this one, you still use the same regression model. The difference comes when you have a categorical variable, let's say with 2 responses. In this case, what uses not logistic regression. As I said earlier, logistic regression can give you only odds ratio, not relative risk. But in cohort and experimental study, what we want to get is either relative risk or hazard ratio. But in cross-sectional and case control, what we want to get is odds ratio. So to get relative risk or hazard ratio, we shouldn't use logistic regression. Rather, there are models called robust Poisson regression model and log binomial regression models, which can give us relative risk for a binary outcome. So when the assumptions of robust Poisson regression model fail, you can use log binomial regression model. So that's why I put them as or. So the other is I'm going to skip the three or more responses and on nominal and ordinal scale for cohort or experimental study, because I have tried to see different literatures and I have asked a number of statisticians. Everywhere I go, what I get is people run for nominal and ordinal variables in a cohort or experimental design by using multinomial and ordinal logistic regression. But this is not appropriate. I personally don't accept it. But there is a technique that you can use on Stata or R software. You can use the link function from the logic to a different one so that it can give you a relative risk. There is that technique, but since I can't show you that right now and I'm not comfortable sharing that, I'm going to skip that part. But you can take it as an assignment. And if there's anyone who knows comfortably to answer this question, you're welcome to drop it on the chat box, or you can raise your hand and you can tell us your experience. So just to finish what we have started, so far we have seen when we're measuring the outcome itself, but sometimes we're interested in measuring the time to outcome. So that means instead of measuring if somebody smokes in 10 years, is the patient going to develop lung CA or he's not going to develop lung CA? We might be interested in assessing the time to the development of lung CA. That means the first time the patient started smoking up to the development of lung CA, how long is it going to take? So in this case, what we are interested in is not just counting the number of lung CA cases, but we're trying to answer the question that how long does it take for a smoker to develop lung CA? So this is a very important clinical question and something that should be actually asked, because this one is an indirect indicator of quality of life, or especially if you consider it in terms of treatment as an outcome. Let's say that you have a patient, some surgical patient, operated and finally discharged alive. So that's a big success. Our patient is discharged alive after a big surgery. But if some of the patients are discharged within 1 week and others are discharged within 2 months, then the patient who stayed 2 months in a hospital won't be as happy as the person who were discharged within a week. Besides, the person who stayed 2 months have developed complications by staying in the hospital by itself, and might have some future disabilities associated with the complications. So these two patients can never be the same. So not only just assessing if the outcome happened or not, we should, as a clinician, be interested in measuring the time that it takes for the patient to reach the outcome, because that time is also a very critical component in terms of quality of life, patient satisfaction, and the burden to the healthcare system. So this type of outcome, the time that's needed to achieve the outcome, or censoring is a concept that means in such type of studies, while following like 300 smokers for 10 years, at the end of the 10 year, we even before reaching the 10th year, some participants can leave our study or even can die due to different reasons like accident without developing lung CA, or by the end of the 10th year, some of the smokers might not develop lung CA. And there are different reasons that we might lose these participants without observing, without them developing the lung CA. So we call these cases censored observations. So there's a special type of analysis that can count the time up to the development of the outcome. And it can also consider these censored observations for which we did not see the outcome, can also be considered in analysis. And we call this special analysis survival analysis. I'm sure you're familiar with it. So survival analysis is interested in measuring the time from a given exposure up to the development of the outcome. And if there are participants who did not develop the outcome while we're observing them due to different reasons, it can also, the analysis method can also accommodate these participants and give us give us the results. So from this type of analysis, what we get is hazard ratio. So basically, some of the I can't say commonly used, but some of the regression models that we should commonly use are this. I hope it makes sense. So let's continue with the other methods that we should follow. So after identifying the appropriate regression model, just like the comparative analysis, let's say by logic, I just picked binary logistic regression. So I'm conducting a cross-sectional design. I have a binary outcome. I'm studying disease outcome as death and alive. So I have to use binary logistic regression. So before running the binary logistic regression model, I have to check the assumptions of the model. Each and every regression model listed here has its own assumption. Without testing the assumptions, we shouldn't run the regression analysis. If some of the assumptions fail, we have to consider modifying the scale of measurement of our outcome variable or changing the analysis model in general into something that fits better. So after that, the next thing is, since we're running regression, that means we want to know we have like different factors, A, B, C, D, like could be age, sex, having comorbid illness, smoking. We're trying to study if this affects our disease outcome, which is the patient either dies or discharged, gets discharged alive. So in order to see the effect of this on the outcome, that means trying to build, when we're trying to build our regression model, we have to be able to select which variables to consider into the regression model. Here we could have at least from A to Z, but we have only considered A up to D in our regression analysis. So what are the criteria? How do we select our variables to be included in the regression model? So which variables to be included in our analysis is the decision is made by two factors. The first one is a statistical method. We run univariate or bivariate analysis using the selected regression model. That means we run the regression model by using A with the outcome, B with the outcome, one by one independently, one-to-one analysis. We just run that and we will see if the p-values less than 0.2 or 0.25. So if in a one-to-one analysis, at a level of significance of 0.25 or 0.2, these are the commonly used. But if we want to be very strict, especially in clinical trials, we can use, we can lower this criteria up to 10%. So if they pass for observational study, 0.5 is enough. If in a one-to-one relationship, our variable passes these criteria, then we will consider it to be included in the final regression model here. So sometimes relying on statistics all in all is not appropriate. Let's say, for example, smoking is a very, like, it's a causative, as a causative agent for lung say. And if we're doing our regression analysis, and if smoking fails somehow to pass the univariate selection criteria statistically, are you comfortable removing it from your analysis? It won't be fair, right? We know that clinically, this is one of the very important factors that could lead someone to develop lung disease. So we should add our clinical decision in the selection of a variable, even if it fails the univariate selection criteria. Sometimes we can decide to include it using our clinical decision or from our previous reading, from our previous knowledge. It comes with its own problem, but something that I'm not going to discuss it now. But it has its own problem due to the nature of the data that is included in our study, not because of the logical concept of the relevance of the variable. But for now, just consider, know that clinical indication is also one of the reasons which we can use to include our variable in the final regression analysis, even if it fails the statistical cutoff point or passing criteria. So finally, we want to know which factor or which factors caused our outcome. That means we are going to run our regression analysis, the final regression analysis, something using the right regression model, what we call multivariable regression analysis. So multivariable means we're including many variables in our study, which are selected based on step 3. So, but in step 3, since we're doing one-to-one analysis, we call it univariate. That means one exposure variable, or bivariate is to refer to that we have only one exposure and one outcome, just 2 variables. But in this case, we're going to include many variables, like let's say A to D, and we will try to see its effect, their effect on the outcome. So the main purpose of running multivariable regression analysis is to control confounders, so that we can get the pure effect of each exposure on the outcome. So from the multivariable regression analysis, when we get the effect of A on our outcome, let's say it says 3 times higher risk, then this result is interpreted by saying that after controlling for the effect of B, C, and D, this could be sex, comorbid illness, and exercise, and let's say this is smoking. So the effect of smoking on the development of lung cancer is 3 times higher as compared to not smoking after controlling for their age, gender, and history of exercise. So unless we control potential confounders, we can't get the pure effect of an exposure variable on outcome. So multivariable analysis is important to answer the question, what factors caused our outcome? The usual cutoff point that we use is 0.05. That means the 95% confidence level is the one that we usually use. So if our sample size is calculated using the 95% confidence level, then our cutoff point also has to be 0.05 level of significance, especially if you're using a two-tailed statistical test. But we can also use 90% or 99% as a cutoff point. So finally, after we get this, what we do is we have to interpret the result of regression analysis based on the measure of association that we get. So the measures of association could be odds ratio, relative risk, hazard ratio, or regression coefficients, like in the case of linear and Poisson regression. So how to interpret these things and which measure of association to use, you can check the EMA webinar on measures of association. I don't know if the video is available, but you can access at least the lecture material from there. So before I can take your question now, but in the meantime, just to make sure that if you guys get this or not, I am going to give you a question. So just write down this question and I'll take you back to the table so that you can pick the proper regression model for this one. It would be great if somebody can explain this, because selecting a regression model is a stepwise process. Unlike the comparative analysis, in the comparative analysis, all we need is we have to see the scale of measurement of the groups to be compared. But in regression analysis, the first step is identifying the correct study design. If you can't identify the study design, then you can't answer the other question. So first identify the study design, then identify the scale of measurement of the outcome. So in between, you have to understand which one is my outcome variable. Then third, you have to be able to identify the scale of measurement of the variable. Then it would be easy to pick the right regression model. So yeah, one problem, just don't say logistic regression model, because as you have seen here, there is no such thing as just logistic regression model. It's either binary or multinomial or ordinal. So you have to name the proper regression model. So is there anyone? Great. Okay, you can drop your answer, binary. Just don't call it binary. Binary means two. Two what? Great. When you send your article for publication, everything is strict, because your audience is going to read your paper in your absence, and you should make it clear to the level that it can be understood by anyone. Great. So do you agree with the binary logistic regression model? So this is, thank you. This is analytic cross-sectional study, right? The authors wanted to assess adherence to antihypertensive medication, which is measured as either good or bad. So it's a binary outcome. And they wanted to see the factors that affect adherence among 600 randomly selected patients. So since it says that 600 randomly selected patients, it does not classify it into any groups, either cases or controls, exposed and unexposed, but it's analytic in nature because it is trying to assess factors. So it definitely is analytic cross-sectional design. And here is a cross-sectional design. And we're trying to assess the outcome itself, and our outcome is adherence to antihypertensive medication. And it says it's measured on binary scale, right? At either good or poor. So the proper type of regression model to use is binary logistic regression model. Thank you so much. One last question. Here, we wanted to see the effect of exercise on hypertensive complications. So our exposure is exercise, and we have started with the exposure, right? We have exposed group and non-exposed group, like 100 adults who exercise and 200 adults who do not exercise, and we followed them to see if they develop complication, right? So at the end, complication is measured as yes or no. Since this is a prospective follow-up study, and since we do not make any of them exercise or do not exercise, this is a prospective cohort study, right? And do you agree with that? Great. So this is a prospective cohort study. And someone writes by saying that the time we're interested in measuring the time up to the development of complication. That's also great. Maybe the question is somehow misleading. If you consider that, yes, we can also say that we're interested in measuring the time to development of complication. But here, I think it's a bit clear that we're interested in measuring the outcome itself. So in this case, what we're going to check is we have a prospective cohort study design. We're studying the outcome itself. Okay, and then we have categorical variable with 2 responses. Then the appropriate regression model to use is Robes-Poisson regression model. When the assumptions or the basic reasons for using this model is not fulfilled, we can use log binomial regression model. Here, there is a very interesting thing. Someone asked, someone texted on the chat box, I saw it. So in a prospective cohort study, we want to get relative risks. That's why we use Robes-Poisson or log binomial regression models. So we use Robes-Poisson regression model when our outcome is not rare. That means when roughly when it's above 20%, let's say the proportion of complication among the study population. If it is above 20%, we can use robust Poisson regression model. But when it's less than 20%, we can use log binomial regression model. It's more efficient. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. So if it is less than 20%, instead of using robust Poisson regression model, the log binomial is more efficient. But I don't know if any of you have ever used log binomial regression model, but when you use log binomial regression model, it usually fails. The model usually fails due to convergence issue, what we call convergence issue. So when we have a problem of convergence issue, and the log binomial regression model fails, then we resort to what? I forgot the name of the person who texted, but he mentioned a very interesting fact. When our outcome is rare, that means when it's something less than 20%, relative risk approximates odds ratio. If you do the calculation normally in a 2x2 table of like this, ABCD, odds ratio is AD over BC, relative risk is A over A plus B divided by C over C plus D. If you insert numbers and if you make the outcome rare, that's less than 20%, and calculate these two, you will get a very comparable result between relative risk and odds ratio. So if that's the case for a binary outcome, all of our options of using a model which can give us relative risk has failed. So if we use binary logistic regression, which is a model that we use in case control and cohort study, and for which can give us odds ratio, since the outcome is rare, the odds ratio that we get from the binary logistic regression model is expected to approximate the relative risk that we could get from the log binomial regression. So when all of these possibilities fail in a prospective cohort, or I wouldn't say experimental, but in a prospective cohort, you can run binary logistic regression, and the result you get, the odds ratio, can be a good approximate of the relative risks that we could get from the log binomial. Does it make sense? Yeah, and for the question, what models do we use for a cohort when we have more than 2 responses? Like I said, I am personally not comfortable with the suggestions that most people give and that most researchers run in their article. You know, the use of robust Poisson and log binomial regressions are not even that much a common trend. Most research articles usually use like binary logistic regression instead of using these 2 regression models and our cohorts data, which is not appropriate. But I have some recommendation. Still, the statisticians, I have some statistician friends, and I have asked them, and all they say is they use multinomial and ordinal logistic regression, but you can change the link function. From the softwares, we get odds ratio and relative risk. So to get odds ratio and relative risk, why we get odds ratio from logistic regression is because of the link function that this regression model has. So it has a logit function. So if you change that logit function, you can get relative risk in stata. So I haven't used that. It's something simple, something that you can change, but I am looking for answers myself. So I would say I can come up with a better answer when I have the answer, but I want you to be all aware. The other thing is someone wrote competing risk assessment. Competing risk assessment, it's part of survival analysis, and it's not about the number of outcomes in a cohort data. But I have another very interesting suggestion, which is something that I have also learned recently, what we call causal inference. Causal inference is a regression, a concept of running regression analysis from observational study, so a cohort observational data, so that the result that we get is a very good approximate of the result that we could possibly get from experimental study of same nature. So the results that we get from a causal inference can be put as a cause and effect relationship because it's as good as an experimental study result. So there are different ways of running causal inference. I have one paper on causal inference using marginal structural model with inverse probability weight and propensity score. So in this case, even if you are running, we're running causal inference using this method, it's a multi-stage analysis method. But at the end of the day, the type of regression analysis that you use can be multinomial, ordinal, or log binomial. It's all right because through the process of building the models, the causal inference method by itself is a prospective data analysis method. So the result that you get can be used as, I don't know, you can be comfortable using these multinomial and ordinal regressions in a cohort data. Maybe, I don't know, if you are interested to read, I can share you the link to the article. So I think I've tried to answer some of your questions. The slide in the video of the webinar will be posted on AMA website. They can drop the link here, I guess. So if you have any other question. Yeah, here's the article. It's a very interesting model to learn. I was personally very excited to learn about it. And when I was trying to learn how other researchers have applied this model, surprisingly, I couldn't find other medical research who used similar models. It's usually applied in statistical field. And I'm personally happy because I was able to use something more advanced for healthcare research. And that's what I want every researcher to use, because there's no such thing as fancy or advanced. We just label them that way because we're not using them and we're afraid of trying. But all of the statistical methods are similar because we select them based on indication. Right? I mean, it's like for a patient who deserves surgical method of management, if you do the operation, you can't call it fancy treatment, right? It's the appropriate treatment. So if I have to use causal inference, and if I use causal inference because other people are not doing it, or because it might be a bit challenging, you can't call it a fancy. I'm sorry, my connection was disturbed. So do you have any other question? So don't forget to make the right choice in any statistical tool selection. For my master thesis, I have worked on a survival analysis, and one of the examiners said that this is a very fancy research analysis method, and I'm proud of you. But I mean, my research question is a survival analysis question, and I have applied the right model. We shouldn't feel very proud or different because we have selected the proper regression model. So make sure to make that decision when you have to. Great. About something that I want to share about running every regression model. It's, for me, the most important step is identifying the proper regression model. If you can do that, running the regression model and interpreting the results is not difficult at all. So here is a link to my Telegram group menu where you can access all of the regression models that are listed here with every step, testing the assumptions, running the regression model with SPSS screenshots, and how to interpret it. So if you're interested in a specific regression model, you can go to the menu and you can select the regression model, and you can see how it's done. So it's something that you can practice on your own. Just understand how to select the method. For the sake of time, let me drop the practice form. And while practicing, you can, oh, I'm sorry. Retrospective and prospective cohort are the same. There is no difference between the two, okay? Retrospective and prospective cohorts during analysis, they are handled the same way. There is no difference between the two. So this is the practice link. Please practice. The post-test will be easy if you attempt the practice. And to help you with the practice, here's the screen. In the meantime, you can drop your questions, and you can also raise your hand and speak. It's usually very quiet. Large webinars are usually quiet. Feel free to raise your hand and ask questions, add to what I have said, and you can say anything. The practice questions are on Google Form. It works. I just checked it. The form works. Please try it again. Here is the link again. So the first step is, as I said, identifying the type of study design. If you can correctly identify the type of study design, then you're like more than halfway. And then the second step is identifying what your outcome variables from the question. Then identifying the scale of measurement of the outcome variable. Then, well, the rest is easy, just picking from the available option. Interpretation of results from both log binomial and robust Poisson regression is the same. There is no difference. Here's the link again. It's the same. Even for logistic regression, the interpretation is the same, except your interpretation is in the context of multiple variables. And for multinomial and binary logistic regression, it's a bit different for ordinal logistic regression. How you interpret it is also available on the Telegram group. You just go to the specific regression model that you are interested on working, and then follow all the steps. There's an SPSS screenshot and every detail of the comment, how to run and interpret it. Please follow that. I think we cannot work on them together, maybe, if it is going to be difficult. So the first one is it wants to assess the prevalence of tuberculosis and factors affecting it among 400 randomly selected adults in Ethiopia. So what's the study design used? You can type it on the chat. So what is the proper study design used in this case? No, the study design. Let's go step by step and let's see. It's cross-sectional, right? Because it says it doesn't classify the participants into any group. So great, it's analytic cross-sectional study. So what's our outcome? What are we interested in studying? What's our outcome variable? TB. Great, great. So it's analytic cross-sectional study. We're trying to study, we're trying to assess tuberculosis development. So it's either yes or no. Great. So for analytic cross-sectional study, in which we're interested in assessing the outcome itself, which is either yes or no. Thank you, presence or absence of TB. Then it's a binary logistic regression model. Great. So most of you have got it right. I just want to make sure we all are on the same page. So this is also another question. Let's see them, just a couple of them. So to assess the effect of vaccine on COVID-19 disease severity, 800 individuals with COVID-19 were recruited and assessed for disease severity. And these groups do not have any natural order. So again, this is what kind of study design is it? Cross-sectional, right? Again, a random group of one large group of population, and our outcome is let's go step by step. So our outcome is disease severity, right? So Marta, do you have anything to ask? Marta? I think the host, please unmute Marta so that she can talk. Manuel also, thank you. Yeah, people are trying to talk. Emma, please can you unmute them? Marta or Fanuel?
She's free to talk.
Okay, I think her mic is mute. Okay, maybe Fanuel in the meantime. Fanuel, do you have any question? Okay, great. I think you guys are ready. We can continue our discussion. So it's our outcome is disease severity, which is in 3 categories, and it doesn't have any natural order. It was actually one of the controversies we had at the beginning of the pandemic. We have one article on COVID-19 disease severity, and some argued that this is an ordinal data, but I am sure most of you have encountered a COVID-19 patient, and some of the patients were presenting with just desaturation and with silent hypoxia with no other feature, both clinical symptoms or just X-ray features. So this type of patients, they just developed severe disease without going through the mild or moderate process. It was a very common encounter. So we have treated it as a nominal variable instead of an ordinal variable. And with a lot of argument, finally, we have decided that it should be a nominal data, and that's how we published our article on COVID severity. So great. So this is a multinomial. I think you've got it. Identifying your ordinal, so it doesn't have any natural order. We said to make it simple, I said that these groups do not have any natural order, so it definitely is multinomial. So just identify your regression model, your study design, and then identify your outcome variable and identify the proper scale of measurement that's used for the outcome variable. Then you can easily pick the type of regression model. So I'm still waiting for those who raised your hands. It would be nice to hear some of your opinion. So this is a prospective cohort, right? To assess the effect of exercise on hypertensive complication. It's something that I have actually put earlier. So you can pick Robbins Poisson or log binomial. This is assessing length of hospital stay in a cross-sectional study. So since it's with the measured in days as a discrete variable, Poisson is the right way. This is 100 cirrhosis, 200 no cirrhosis. This is case control design. And the outcome is binary, so we can use binary logistic regression. I think with repeated practice, you can get it at the tip of your finger. You guys are doing great, by the way. I am seeing your answers on the main page. A lot of you have already tried it and got a very good grade. Thank you so much. So I guess if you have any question, I can give you 5 minutes maybe. Or Emma can take over. Rebecca, I think you can ask. Can you unmute her, please, Emma? Brooke, you can talk. You can unmute your mic and ask, please. Emma will give you the link to the post test when it's ready. And okay, maybe if you're more comfortable dropping your questions on the chat box, then you can do that. This is all from my side. Thank you so much for attending. Emma, you can take over. Thank you.